It's Galentine's Day this weekend, and to celebrate, I wanted to bring together a group of amazing women who are fellow Zelda creators to talk about our favorite thing, The Legend of Zelda. So, in my first ever collab video, I am so excited to welcome to the channel the Geek Apprentice, Drakenwild, and Lilly Hyrule. Thank you guys again for joining me, and let's get into it. First, tell me about your path to becoming a Zelda-tuber. What was your first Zelda game, and what made you fall in love with the series to the point that you wanted to make content about it?
My first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time for the N64, or I guess you could say it was the first Zelda game I experienced, even if I didn't totally play it because I was only 3 when it came out. But I have 2 older brothers who played lots of video games, so I was exposed to a lot through them. While I had grown up around Ocarina of Time, Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, and Wind Waker was kind of where things fell off, and mostly because my brother stopped playing Nintendo games. I continued, but not as strongly as them. I mostly focused on like Animal Crossing, and then eventually I got a Wii, but I never got things like Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. Honestly, most of my friends didn't know what Zelda was, so I was kind of focused on the things that we had in common, so Zelda kind of fell by the wayside, only being a nostalgic thing. However, when I went to college years later, I started making friends who also played The Legend of Zelda, and it kind of inspired me to get back into it. Now, by this point, we were in the early stages of Zelda Wii U, later known as Breath of the Wild, so Zeldatube was like in its infancy. But even then, I looked up one Let's Play video about Twilight Princess because that was the game that came out after I had stopped playing Zelda or stopped playing new Zelda games, and it just opened up the Pandora's box of Zelda theories, timelines, all these different things. I found and discovered so many channels and was just so enthralled by this new information. Because there was a lot of nostalgia, it was as if I fell in love with the series or rediscovered it for the first time, almost. I don't know if that makes any sense. And I realized just how much I loved the stories, the music, and was finally getting into the gameplay aspect of it, even though I dabbled in it as a child. And after watching just so many videos about The Legend of Zelda and all the different theories, I realized I just wanted to talk about it. That was it. I just wanted to talk about Zelda as well as other things. Harry Potter, Animal Crossing, The Hunger Games, and other fandoms, if you will. So in the spring of my senior year of college, which would have been 2018, I started slowly saving to get a camera, microphone, all the things I needed to be able to start creating videos, even though I had absolutely zero idea what I was doing. But hey, you gotta start somewhere. And on June 6th of 2018, I released my first video, which was about whether or not a Zelda movie would be a good idea, funny enough.
My first Zelda game was Link Between Worlds. I got it for my 18th birthday along with a 3DS. I wasn't really a Zelda player before that, so I joined late. And it was around the time Breath of the Wild was coming out. I believe it was shortly after the premiere. I think, I'm not too sure. It was sometime around then. So I was very much interested in getting that, but I wasn't gonna have a Switch for a few years yet. Then I played a bunch of more. I played Twilight Princess, which I borrowed from a friend. I played Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask on the 3DS, which I had. And then finally I saved up for the Switch, and I used one that was like from release almost. It was like an older unit, and then I got Breath of the Wild on that, and that was really what made it click for me. It was that game. The other Zelda games were fine. They were fun. I had fun with them. I liked Ocarina of Time very much, but what made it really click was Breath of the Wild specifically, and all of the lore and theory community around it. I just really fell in love with the setting of it and the fact that you can basically do historical studies and like sort of in-game archaeology with it by looking at ruins and so on to create theories for them. A big inspiration was Nintendo Black Crisis and his work on the Zonai specifically. That was a huge inspiration.
Hello, Kokiri Theory. Thank you very much for having me. Lilly here. I go by Lilly Hyrule on the internet or creating videos on YouTube. Starting a little bit with how I became a Zelda-tuber. I have to be honest that I don't really consider myself a Zelda-tuber. I feel like I'm a baby. I kind of started a little bit more leaning towards gameplay. Probably a few top lists here and there, some analysis. But I guess I'm going to start with what was my first Zelda game. You probably heard of it, is Ocarina of Time. And I played the original for the Nintendo 64. And that's the one that pretty much made me fall in love with the entire series to a point that I really wanted to make content around that. But I started creating content back in 2015. It was in Spanish because that's my native language. English is not my first language. And it was about just any video game. Then I started noticing that people were kind of enjoying when I was playing specifically any Zelda game. And I was kind of avoiding the subject. I was trying to go around it. But then eventually Tears of the Kingdom came. Then I got my first 2 viral videos. One was for Instagram where I was explaining how to repair your weapons on Tears of the Kingdom. And of course I also reacted to the last Tears of the Kingdom trailer. And you know, I was kind of embarrassed at first because I started crying when I saw everything that was happening in that trailer. I got very, very excited, and I wasn't sure how people were gonna take it. It was a surprise to me that it resonated with a lot of people. It resonated with the community a lot, and yeah, that's how I started. You know what? I think it's time. I think the universe is telling me that I need to make content about The Legend of Zelda.
As for me, my first game was Ocarina of Time, which I loved, but the first game where I really knew this series was Wind Waker. I was, I think, 8 when it came out and was totally obsessed with Zelda for a few years, including Twilight Princess, but then I fell off for a bit. But kind of like Geek, I rediscovered my love later on after finding friends with similar interests and discovered the Zeldatube community while playing Breath of the Wild. During COVID in particular, I started getting obsessed with watching theory videos from NBC like Draken said, as well as Moxie Watts, Monster Maze, Hyrule Gamer, and others, including some of the folks in this video. But when Tears of the Kingdom hype started, I started noticing things that I wanted to talk about and began developing my own theories. And at a certain point, I wanted to share them with more people than my boyfriend, so I started posting them. And that was actually 2 years ago this week. My next question is, what's your favorite memory or moment while playing a Zelda game?
So I would say I kind of have 2 answers for this. I have the nostalgic answer from when I was really young and one that would be more recent. The nostalgic one would be, this is going to sound so weird, but in Majora's Mask, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but there's that mask where when Link wears it, he starts dancing and he teaches those 2 sisters how to dance. One of my brothers and I found great pleasure in trying to imitate that dance, and it's a real good thing that's not caught on video anywhere. As far as a more recent moment that I would consider favorite, it would have to be playing Breath of the Wild for the first time on the Wii U. This was during a time when we were really strapped for money in my family, and my mom knew that I was really interested in this new Zelda game, but we couldn't afford a Switch, so she was able to get a Wii U secondhand and buy Breath of the Wild. I spent like the entirety of my Christmas break, yeah, that's how late it was well after the game came out, playing that game practically day and night. My mom and I were both just so enthralled by it, which for those who don't know, yes, my mom does enjoy playing video games here and there. My brothers and I grew up with her playing the same games with us. And there are 2 specific moments when first playing Breath of the Wild that stick out to me. The first is the obvious coming out of the Shrine of Resurrection in that cave and seeing this massive open world. I had seen some trailers, but not much at that point. But actually the bigger key moment was when I had just talked to the old man, known as King Rome, and my mom was sitting with me during this, and I had a stick, and I went to go beat up a red bokoblin, thinking I could handle it, and got killed very, very quickly, and for whatever reason in that moment I went, oh yes, I love this game. I am ready to fall in love with the series all over again.
Strangely enough, I feel like it's really weird. The first time the first time I was going through the Great Plateau, because Breath of the Wild felt so different from all the games I've played up till that point, which weren't that many, to be fair. And yeah, the feeling it gave with all of the ambient sound, especially the ambient sound, they did such a phenomenal job on the sound effects with this game. The way it sounded and the way it looked, it was amazing, and I loved every minute of it. So yeah, I have very fond memories of my first time with the Great Plateau and the way I just wandered around in the forest hunting for things and picking up mushrooms and stuff. It's such a little thing, but it like stuck out to me in a weird way.
Well, I don't really have anything in mind, or at least I can't think of a specific memory or moment. But what I can share with you, Zelda has always been an escape for me from whatever's going on around me. I've always find a very comforting place in any Zelda game for me. That's really what I like about playing a Zelda game.
I don't know if this is a favorite memory, technically, but probably my most vivid core memories were from my first games, like in Ocarina of Time when Sheik was revealed to be Zelda, and then in Twilight Princess when Zelda got possessed by Ganon. Both of those moments just like rocked my world because as a kid, those were just such wild, mind-blowing reveals. The next question is, do you prefer the open world format of games like Breath of the Wild or the more structured gameplay of the classic Zelda titles?
I honestly have a very tough time answering whether I prefer the open world format or the more structured gameplay because it depends on the game. Ocarina of Time is still my favorite. I just started playing Echoes of Wisdom because I had a baby like a week before the game came out, so I'm just now playing it and I absolutely love it. But Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are just massively wonderful experiences for me. So I'm gonna kind of have to give the cop-out answer of it depends on the game. I really truly love both.
Well, by now that should be obvious. I am very much in love with what Breath of the Wild did, though I do feel like Tears of the Kingdom kinda failed in replicating the feeling. Reusing the map really did hurt it in the long run, because there wasn't nearly as much sense of wonder and discovery as it was in Breath of the Wild, which was a big part of the game for me. And while the older Zelda titles are definitely fun, and I had fun with them, they didn't click with me nearly as much as Breath of the Wild did. That said, I also feel like I've kind of grown out of open worlds as a person, so it's kind of like a strange place for me to be in. So that's a bit weird. So yeah, I definitely prefer the open world format, the open air format, but like maybe tone it down a little, make it smaller maybe. I'm kinda getting into the territory of the last questions.
This is a tough question. It's a tough question because I really enjoy Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but while growing up playing the linear path or the linear storytelling and all of that, I'm more used to that. However, I do understand and accept the changes and the future of the series. So the short answer, I don't prefer open world formats, but I'm used to them and I'm learning to embrace it and loving them.
I think I have to agree and say that it depends on the game. I love both, and I lean open world, but I would love a sort of hybrid that combines them. I'm also curious to get your takes on how you feel about the portrayal of Princess Zelda as a character throughout the series. Do you think her role has evolved meaningfully?
I was never someone who had an issue with the portrayal of Princess Zelda as the damsel in distress in most Zelda games. That's just not a concept that has ever bothered me. Besides, when it comes to Zelda games, a lot of the time she has her own special powers and her own things that she's doing and capable of, and the only reason she becomes the quote damsel in distress, even though she's definitely not weak, is because she's the flippin' princess with the Triforce of Wisdom. Naturally, she's going to be sought after by the enemy. That said, I do think her role has evolved extremely meaningfully. I know the joke right now is, oh my gosh, Echoes of Wisdom is actually the first Legend of Zelda because we play as her in a mainline game. Not counting things like Spirit Tracks where you kind of play as her but not really. But I would argue Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are true Legends of Zelda. They are her story. Say what you will about the story of those games, I personally loved them. Yes, I would like to be more involved with the story in the future, but regardless, I absolutely fell in love with watching the growth of this Zelda. First in Breath of the Wild and then massively so in Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, that story absolutely wrecked me. And that's why I personally think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are actual Legends of Zelda, as far as the joke is concerned.
Yeah, because from what I've seen of Let's Plays and my own playthroughs of the older Zelda games, in the old Zelda, the princess was barely even a character most of the time. She was sidetracked very hard. She appeared episodically. She was pretty much just a background thing. And then come the Wild games and Skyward Sword. She is actually an important part of the story. She's a participant. She does things. Well, not so much in Breath of the Wild. Depends what you count as a story in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because it all happens in the past. But like, if we consider just the memories, then the memories in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are all about Zelda. So it's like she definitely is more important to the stories of these games if we consider the memories themselves to be the important part of the plot. Or rather, the plot of the game. So yeah, I feel like the portrayal of her has improved, and she's much more of a character in those memories, in those newer games, than she was in most cases previously. She has her quirks, she has her personality, she has her interests. There is a lot of things that I can say about her. Not so much with the Twilight Princess Zelda, for example, or even Ocarina of Time one.
Princess Zelda has always been, to me, a very strong character. She evolved from being the damsel in distress when originally for The Legend of Zelda, where Link has to go through all of these trials for him to save the princess, to having a real voice as Princess of Hyrule, and also being the leader of all the sages as a sage of time, and all of the things that really makes her the one with a wisdom part of the Triforce, of course. So I feel that Zelda is very, very important as Link and Ganondorf, and, for the entire kingdom for that matter. So yeah, I do think that her role has evolved meaningfully throughout the series.
So I asked this because I have always been such a fan of Princess Zelda, and in particular have always been obsessed with the idea of playing as her. I remember being frustrated by her limited role in some of the games because I thought she was such a cool character. I've loved her in pretty much every appearance, but I agree with the others who've said that her role has grown much more important in recent games. Obviously, this year, she was the playable character in Echoes of Wisdom, which was a huge milestone, but she had such meaningful story arcs in the Wild games that felt way more developed than previous games. I still think it was a massive miss to not make her the main character of Tears of the Kingdom, but at least there are mods for that sort of thing, right? I'd also love to know, how do you feel in general about the representation of women in the series? And who are some of your favorite female characters?
I have never really given much thought about the representation of women in the series. Kind of similar to the whole damsel in distress thing, that concept really just doesn't bother me. But when you look at the time period, I guess you could say this is framed after, a lot of people look at Legend of Zelda and we kind of think medieval a bit for a lot of the games, then I think the representation is great and accurate to what it's kind of reflecting. Besides, you've got Zelda, who is incredibly powerful. I mean, look at Ocarina of Time. She's chic, for crying out loud. But yes, it never really bothered me that we only play as Link or that most of the characters are guys. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't bother me. As far as my favorite female characters, specifically Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Zelda is definitely one. Hyrule, or Errol, however you want to pronounce it, from Wind Waker. Yes, surprisingly I did not say Tetra. I would also say specifically Skyward Sword Zelda, and she's not high on my list, which will shock people, but Midna's in there as well. Sometimes I do genuinely find Midna mean and annoying. I love her character arc though, so I can't deny that.
I think it's really good. I don't have any favorite female characters or really favorite characters in general, because in Zelda the stories aren't character driven really most of the time. They are plot driven, and the characters are kind of weak. The characterizations is kind of weak across the board, which, for me makes it a little hard to connect with them. So I don't really have favorite characters per se, maybe favorite designs. And if we consider favorite designs, I guess then the cake goes to Urbosa, because she is just a badass. She is very beautiful, very tall. We don't know much about her because, again, weak characterization, but she gives nice impression, is what I'm gonna say. But regarding the general representation of women, I think Zelda as a series is one of the better ones, because there is a lot of female characters. Female characters are often active. There is the whole pantheon that's just female goddesses. Even the dragons are female in Breath of the Wild, in Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah, there is a lot of femininity in those games represented here, both in lore and in the character roster. There is lots of women all around who are helping you, sometimes hindering you, in case of Gerudo in Ocarina of Time, for instance. So yeah, I feel like the representation is really good here.
We have seen a lot of representation of women, for sure. Some of my favorite female characters, well, I have to go, of course, with Princess Zelda. I mean, I think that she has always been very important for the entire story. However, I have to say that my favorite Zelda has always been from Skyward Sword, which, oddly enough, she was in royalty back then. I mean, she was, of course, the daughter of the headmaster of the academy. I really love her character development within that story. We see a very unusual side of Zelda, and not just her, but also the relationship that she has with Link, as being childhood friends and everything. I think it's a very beautiful relationship that we see on that game. But talking about any other female characters, I have to go with Impa. I mean, she is amazing, and she is a protector. She is always there. And I guess the last one that I'm gonna add is going to be Tetra. I mean, she's a pirate. What else can I say about her? Of course, she ended up being Princess Zelda. Sorry, spoiler alert, but yeah, I think Tetra will definitely be my third and favorite one. The list could go on and on. I'll be rambling for hours about my favorite female characters, but I think I'm gonna leave it as it is right now.
I would agree for sure. I think the series does do a great job of representing women. We get to see such a wide variety of female characters and personalities, from goofy to serious and friendly to villainous. Obviously, like I said, pretty much every incarnation of Zelda is going to be my favorite character, but some of my other favorites include Medli, Agatha, and Midna. Now, on this channel, we love a good unhinged conspiracy theory, so I've got to ask, do you have any favorite theories from any of the games?
I have always personally followed the idea that the Link of Ocarina of Time, specifically Child Timeline, does eventually marry Malon, or Milan, however you want to pronounce it, and that leads eventually to the direct descendant of Link in Twilight Princess. There's tons of videos out there explaining this theory, and I think it's pretty valid, even though, of course, it's based on some assumptions. But on the other hand, there's a different theory that I think is totally invalid, totally easily debunked, but I absolutely love, also Ocarina of Time, and that is that Zelda and Link from that game are actually separated twins at birth. There's plenty of videos on that one as well, I'm sure you can find. I definitely do not believe it at all, but I think it's hilarious and a very interesting idea.
Favorite theory. I am very bad at picking favorite anything, really. Don't ever ask me what my favorite Pokemon is, because the answer is going to change every time. From what immediately comes to mind, I recall really liking Monster Mazes, I believe it was, a theory about The statues of 7 heroines from Gerudo Desert being related to the 7 sages from Tears of the Kingdom, and it was released before Tears of the Kingdom came out. It was proven incorrect by the game's release, which is unfortunate because I thought it was really cool. The other one that's not mine that comes to mind is one that I actually don't agree with, but I just thought it was very cool and like I wouldn't say it was well constructed because it wasn't, but I liked the idea behind it, shall we say. Was that the monks from Breath of the Wild were secretly evil all along, and they were working for Ganondorf and trying to hinder Link in his quest to save Hyrule, just secretly, and stuff like that. The evidence for that theory was very weak and I didn't agree with it, but I like the spirit and I like the idea, even though it's clearly incorrect. So yeah, that's what immediately jumps at me from other creators, not to mention obviously Nintendo Black Crisis' all of the Zonai research, because holy hell, that was a lot. I loved those back in the day. It was great. From my own, I would say a hill I'm going to die on in terms of theories is that Hyrule Kingdom isn't necessarily the nicest thing, organization, whatever, on the face of the continent. I've never really covered that, but I pretty strongly believe that they are kinda brutal towards other races and they more than likely included them into their kingdom, annexed them into their kingdom by force, and it's probably not a very nice relationship, even though it keeps the appearances of being a friendly ally relationship. I believe it's not really the case, and that had they have the choice, Zora and Goron wouldn't really be a part of Hyrule and they would just have their own thing. Well, maybe not Goron's, I don't think Gorons care, but Zora definitely. Zora would probably prefer to just run their own kingdom and be their own thing instead of being a part of Kingdom of Hyrule. Like, they have kings, for crying out loud, but yet they are seemingly a part of the kingdom and bowing to the King of Hyrule. So yeah, that's the one that I'd say is a favorite of mine from my own theories.
I'm not sure if this counts as conspiracy theory, but I have to say the one for 5 stages of grief in Majora's Mask. And that also connects with Navi, of course, because we can see how Navi just leaves and we don't know anything about her after the events of Ocarina of Time. Link being lost in Termina and then going through all of these events in Majora's Mask. Those are my 2 favorites at the moment.
My favorite is pretty similar to one Draken mentioned, but basically the hill I've decided to die on in many of my videos is that the Zonai were secretly evil and founded Hyrule in conquest, not peace like they claim. And on a completely different subject, do you have any Zelda-related hobbies outside of making videos?
I wish I could say I had lots of Zelda hobbies outside of making the videos, but in the past couple of years, I just really haven't had time for it. I mean, I do have, a fair amount of merchandise. A lot of it's put away right now because we live in such a small place. But I did cosplay as Goddess Hylia one time when I went to see Symphony of the Goddesses my senior year of college.
Actually, no. I just make the videos and I just play the games on occasion. I'm not that much into Zelda, to be completely honest with you. I'm a fake fan. I was only really ever into Breath of the Wild, like heads over heels, and then it didn't really work out with Tears of the Kingdom, and so now I'm in a strange place as a content creator on the platform.
Yes, I do cosplay, and I've been collecting a lot of Zelda stuff. It wasn't a possibility for me a few years back, but now, everything that I see that has a Legend of Zelda logo, I'm gonna get. But I'm very specific when it comes to collecting stuff. I usually focus a bit more on official licensed products, or of course something that is Nintendo and not just official license. So I'm kind of picky when it comes to collecting Zelda stuff, and I'm just amazed the amount of merchandise that there's out there. We didn't have that a few decades back. Is like the perfect time for you to start collecting anything Zelda.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to being too busy for most things, but I will say I am a big crafter, so I have done some craft projects that are related to Zelda. I've done a clay dragon and hope to one day do a cross stitch of the Breath of the Wild tapestry. Also, P.S. Lily, your cosplay is amazing. My last question is, what are some of your hopes or predictions for the future of the series?
My hope for the future of Zelda is they just keep doing what they're doing. One of my favorite things about the series is they're always willing to try new stuff even when it kind of goes against the grain. And while they do absolutely listen to the fans and what they like and don't like, the creators, to me, seem like they genuinely enjoy creating games, genuinely enjoy playing the games. And I mean, that makes sense, right? Why would you create a game that you yourself don't even enjoy playing? I have yet to play a Zelda game that truly 100% disappointed me. Well, that is if we're not counting Triforce Heroes. Even games that I personally don't enjoy playing myself, such as Twilight Princess, don't hate me, the first couple of Zelda games and a few others out there, I still recognize what awesome games they are, even if they're not fun for me personally. I usually still enjoy watching people play them. And I think that says a lot about the creators and the legend that they have made. No pun intended. I guess I also hope that they're able to continue this wonderful streak of every several years coming out with a banger of the game, because I love the idea of my son growing up and in a few years the next Zelda game coming out and that being his first Zelda game. Of course, I'm going to want him, both my husband and I are going to want him to play the older games as well and see if they interest him too. But I'm very curious to see what the first big 3D Zelda game will be in his lifetime and if he'll get to play it and enjoy it. And maybe it'll impact him the way it has me. That would be so amazing.
I don't really have any predictions. Well, no, that's not true. I feel like I would predict that they will stick to the open air format because that's what got very popular and what made them a lot of money. They will keep introducing weird gimmicks to that open air formula. They will not go back to the traditional dungeons because they already said that they prefer the new format. Though they will probably attempt to find a middle ground between the two. That's what I think they are gonna do. And they're just gonna probably make a new map for the new game and just find something else to set it apart from the predecessors, and the standard from the Breath of the Wild is going to be the new standard for a bunch of Zelda games going forward for a while, just like Ocarina of Time was for years after it released. What I would hope is what I mentioned earlier, is that they scale it down, because while I don't mind the open air format, I don't mind the open world format that much. I liked it a lot, especially when it came out first. Now a bit less so, but I liked it a lot back then, and I think I would enjoy it still. I just need it to be a little more focused. I would like it to have more things to discover, things of the Neidra on top of Mount Lanayru, Mal's Neidra caliber, that you just stumble into on your own and you aren't guided there, but by much of anything other than maybe a side quest or two. And then you just encounter it and you are wowed by the whole experience. I would hope for more of that. I would hope that they rekindle the spirit of exploration they had in Breath of the Wild, that they make exploring the map and every nook and cranny of it worth it again. So yeah, I would hope for a smaller map that has more things worth finding, the things that make you I don't know, emotional is not the correct word. Emotional is not the right word. More things that just make you stare at them in awe, I would say, is more accurate. Basically like the dragons. First time finding the 3 dragons. You just go, what the hell is that? And yeah, and then you encounter them and it's wonderful experience. So I would hope for that, just on a smaller scale, so it's more digestible for an adult with limited time, who also grew out of open worlds and them being these massive sandboxes. Yeah, a lot of feelings here.
I hope that they keep doing what they're doing. I want them to keep making amazing Zelda video games. Yeah, it's going to be open world format for all the other games that we get. The Nintendo team and also Gresso recently with Echoes of Wisdom and some of the other remakes and remaster for the series, they have been doing an amazing job. I know that there was a lot of talks around Eiji Aonuma mentioning that they're not going back to the linear classic formula for The Legend of Zelda, but I'm sure that he meant it in a way that we're not going to get rid of it, but we're going to add it to what we have currently for open world formats like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I don't really understand how, like a few decades back, the gameplay and the story were working perfectly together and now they don't feel as connected. And I sure hope they get this connection figured out as they did back then and they continue to do so in the future.
Again, my not-so-secret hope for the series is playable Zelda on a big mainline 3D game. But, like the others said, I'm definitely looking forward to more of the incredible innovation and exploration that we've come to expect from this amazing series. I especially hope for more lore-dense stories that will continue to feed this community with all the great theory and lore analysis videos that we love so much.
And that's it for me, Kokiri Theory. Thank you very much again for having me. And for you who's watching or listening to this, you can find me as Lilly Hyrule on YouTube or any of the social medias. And I'm currently going live twice a week on my channel, but I usually schedule them in advance, so feel free to visit my channel. All right, bye!
But thank you again so much for inviting me for this Galentine's video. And yeah, have an awesome day.
Thank you, Kokiri, for having me. It was nice answering the questions. And see you again.
And just wanted to say again, thank you so much to Lilly Hyrule, Drakenwild, and the Geek Apprentice for taking the time to chat about Zelda with me. These ladies all make incredible content that I totally look up to, and if for whatever reason you don't already follow them, definitely check them out. I've linked their channels in the description. Hope everyone has a lovely Galentine's or Valentine's this weekend. Whatever you celebrate, I'm glad you spent it with us. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and as always, see you next time.